Take two people, same city, same decade, same job title at similar companies, logging the same hours per week. After 10 years, one of them has a mortgage on a rental property, a funded retirement account, and money that earns while they sleep. The other has a thinner savings account and a resume that grew without the underlying wealth ever keeping up. Same hours, same effort, different architecture. The world they lived in was built by people who needed them to stay confused about why. Here is what is actually happening. Every night when you close your eyes, your brain enters a state so receptive, so open to new instruction, that neuroscientists have spent decades studying it. During that window, your subconscious is not resting. It is running, sorting, filing, reinforcing, taking every belief you hold about money, about what you deserve, about what is possible for someone like you, and pressing it deeper into the architecture of who you are. Most people have no idea this is happening. And so they wake up the next morning and grind again. They push their conscious will against a foundation that was quietly rebuilt overnight to resist them. You have probably felt this. You work, you plan, you try, and something invisible pulls the outcome back toward familiar territory. Not failure exactly, just never quite enough. What if the window you have been ignoring is the most important one you have? What you are about to hear is not about working differently. It is about what happens when you finally stop working against yourself. In the 8 hours you thought were doing nothing. By the time this ends, sleep will never mean the same thing to you again. Chapter 1. You grind all day, earn nothing new. Something has been true about human beings since before any written record exists. Across every culture, every era, every landscape where people have gathered to build lives and trade and survive, there has always been a division, not between the lucky and the unlucky, not between the talented and the talentless. The division has always been between those who understand where decisions are actually made, and those who believe they are steering a ship that is, in truth, steering them. This is not a new idea. It has been spoken in desert tents and marble halls and quiet rooms where people sat alone and finally asked the right question. You are asking that question right now, even if you have not put it into words yet. The fact that you are here, listening, means something specific is ready to change. Not tomorrow, tonight. Picture this. It is 7:45 in the evening. You have been working since before 9 this morning. Your shoulders carry the particular weight that comes not from lifting anything heavy, but from holding yourself together through 10 hours of effort that somehow produced no visible progress. You open your banking app. You have done this 3 times today already, as if the number might change between checks. It does not change. It is the same flat, indifferent number it was yesterday and the day before, and if you are honest with yourself, roughly the same number it has been for the past several months. You are not lazy. That is the part that burns most. You worked today. You answered things, built things, showed up, pushed through. You did what you were told success requires, and yet the number on that screen does not reflect any of that. It sits there like a locked door. Hold that image for a moment. A locked door. We will come back to it. Not because it is a comfortable image, but because what you believe about that door right now is almost certainly wrong. By the time this chapter ends, something in the way you see it will have already started to shift. Here is what almost no one in the world of financial advice will tell you directly. The reason you are exhausted, and the reason your income is flat are not two separate problems. They are one problem wearing two faces. And the name of that problem is not laziness, not lack of skill, not bad luck. The name of that problem is this: you are trying to change your financial life from the top floor of a building whose basement you have never visited. Bring to mind the version of you waking up each morning from 3 years back, not in a painful way, just honestly. What were you earning? What did you tell yourself about money back then? What did money feel like, not intellectually, but in your body when you thought about it? Here is the uncomfortable part. For most people listening right now, those feelings have not changed very much. The circumstances may have shifted. The job title may be different. The numbers may be slightly higher or lower. But the feeling of money, the emotional texture of it, the sense of scarcity or safety or stress that rises in your chest when you check that app, that feeling is probably very close to what it was 3 years ago. And 5 years before that. That is not a coincidence. Researchers who study financial behavior have found, repeatedly, that roughly 80% of the spending choices, saving choices, and earning choices a person makes are not made consciously. They are made by patterns. Patterns formed early, reinforced constantly, and running so far below the surface of your awareness that you experience them not as choices at all, but as reality. You do not feel like you are choosing to avoid opportunities. You feel like the opportunities are simply not there. You do not feel like you are choosing to spend the moment money arrives. You feel like the expenses just happen. The pattern is invisible because you are inside it. This is what no hustle philosophy will ever fix. There is a doctrine that has dominated the conversation about money and success for the past generation. You know it well because you have lived inside it. It says, work harder, wake earlier, do more. Rest is for the weak. The grind is the path. There is something real in that doctrine, a core of truth about effort and consistency that should not be thrown away. But the doctrine has a fatal blind spot. It treats your waking hours as the only hours that matter. It treats your sleeping mind as empty time, dead air, a gap between productive days. That assumption is costing you more than any bad investment ever could. Here is what is actually happening while you sleep. Your brain does not go quiet. It consolidates. It sorts. It reinforces the patterns it ran all day. And if the pattern it ran all day is a scarcity program, a deeply wired belief that money is scarce, that you are behind, that safety is always just out of reach, then your sleeping brain reinforces that program every single night. You wake up and grind again from inside the same invisible architecture. Different day, same ceiling. 𝗜𝗠𝗣𝗢 worked as a project manager at a logistics company in her early 30s. She was good at her job, well regarded, and earning what her industry considered a reasonable salary. But 𝗜𝗠𝗣𝗢 had a habit she barely noticed. Every time a financial opportunity appeared, something in her found the reason it would not work. A friend mentioned a side contract, and 𝗜𝗠𝗣𝗢's first thought was that she was probably not qualified. A colleague suggested she negotiate a raise, and 𝗜𝗠𝗣𝗢 spent 3 days preparing for the conversation before canceling it entirely. She told herself she was being practical, being realistic, not getting ahead of herself. What 𝗜𝗠𝗣𝗢 did not know was that she had grown up in a house where her parents talked about money the way other families talked about illness. Carefully, quietly, with the particular tension of something that could turn dangerous if you touched it wrong. She had absorbed that tension before she had words for it. By her 30s, she did not hear it as a voice. She heard it as reality. One evening, a mentor asked 𝗓𝗓 a single question, not about her goals or her career or her finances. He asked, "What does money feel like to you right now in your body when you think about having a lot of it?" She expected to feel excited. Instead, she felt afraid. That was the beginning of 𝗓𝗓 finding the basement. Not every change begins with a dramatic realization, but some changes require you to see the architecture before you can rebuild it. This is what the sleep window is. It is not magic. It is biology. In the hours of deep rest, your brain moves through states where the walls between your conscious reasoning and your deeper stored patterns become permeable. Information, feeling, repetition, these things reach deeper during sleep than they can when your critical mind is fully awake and standing guard. This is why you sometimes wake up with the solution to a problem that stumped you the night before. Something worked on it while you were gone. The question is, what is that something working on right now? What patterns are being reinforced in the basement of your mind every night while you lie there exhausted from another flat day? If the answer is a scarcity program, then no amount of alarm clock discipline will outrun it. You can wake at 5. You can read the right books. You can take the courses and follow the plans and still find yourself staring at that same indifferent number on a Tuesday evening, wondering where the gap between effort and result actually lives. The gap lives in the basement. In a later section, you will hear a point about willpower and financial change that cuts across the standard story. After that really registers, it alters not just how you think, but what you actually do before you fall asleep each night. For now, hold this. Your conscious effort is real. It matters, but it is operating on a floor that the basement controls. You have been trying to repaint the ceiling without knowing the floor beneath you is tilted. This book is not about painting ceilings. It is about finding the mechanism that tilts the floor, understanding it, and using the one window in every single day when that mechanism is most open to being reset. That window opens tonight. The question is not whether you are willing to work harder. You have already proven you are. The question is whether you are willing to stop treating sleep as the absence of progress and start treating it as the most productive hours you have. Chapter 2. Your beliefs are someone else's rent. Somewhere right now, you believe something about money that you think is yours. You believe it deeply, the way you believe in gravity or daylight. You have never questioned it because it feels like simple truth, the kind that needs no proof. Most people who are struggling financially hold at least one of these beliefs without knowing it. Beliefs like, money is hard to come by, or people like me have to work twice as hard for half as much, or wanting more is selfish. You carry these ideas the way you carry your own name, without thinking, without choosing, and that is exactly the problem. Those beliefs are not yours. You did not arrive at them through experience and reasoning. You inherited them. Someone handed them to you before you were old enough to refuse, and they have been quietly determining the ceiling of your financial life ever since. By the time you were 7 years old, the operating system was already installed. Everything you have done since, every job you took, every raise you did not ask for, every dollar you spent before you saved it, that was the program running. Not you. The program. This chapter is going to show you where the program came from. And more importantly, it is going to show you that you did not write it. Here is the question you need to sit with before anything else in this chapter lands. When did you decide what you deserve? Not what you want. What you deserve. Hold that question. The answer is coming, but you need to feel its weight first. Developmental psychologists have studied the first 7 years of life for decades, and what they keep finding is this. A child's brain in those early years is not filtering information the way an adult brain does. It is not asking whether something is true or false, helpful or harmful. It is simply recording. Everything that happens in your environment during those years goes in as fact. Your parents' arguments about bills. The way your grandmother talked about rich people, whether the word expensive was spoken with awe or disgust. All of it entered you as data, and your young brain built a model of the world from that data. That model became your financial identity. Go back to the version of you waking up each morning from 3 years back. Think about the financial decisions you made back then, the ones you look back on now and cannot quite explain. Maybe you had a chance to invest and pulled back at the last second. Maybe you got a raise and within a month had somehow spent it all and still felt broke. Maybe someone offered you an opportunity and something in you, some quiet internal voice, said, "This is not for people like you." Where did that voice come from? You did not invent it. Someone taught you that voice. Someone modeled it for you so many times that eventually it started sounding like your own thoughts. This is Marcus. Marcus grew up in a house where the bills arrived in a specific kind of envelope, the kind with a red stripe across the top, the kind that meant you were late. His father worked 12-hour shifts at a cement plant and had a saying he repeated so often it became wallpaper. He would say, "We are not the kind of people who get lucky." Not bitterly, matter-of-factly, the way you would say the sky is blue or winter is cold. Marcus heard this saying before dinner. He heard it when a neighbor bought a new car. He heard it at holidays when his cousins talked about traveling. By the time Marcus was 6, he had stopped hearing it as his father's voice and started hearing it as his own. At 29, Marcus ran a small landscaping business. He was good at the work. His clients liked him. He had 1 employee, then 2, then briefly 3, until something uncomfortable happened every time the business grew past a certain size and he found reasons to slow it back down. A client was too demanding. The insurance costs were too high. He needed to wait until things were more stable. He did not recognize the pattern until a business coach pointed it out. Marcus had been at the edge of genuine growth 4 separate times. Each time he had stepped back, the coach asked him what he believed would happen if the business actually succeeded. Marcus could not answer right away. When the answer came, it surprised him. He said, "I guess I think it would not last." And then, "I guess I think it is not really for me." He had never said those words out loud before, but they had been running in the background his entire adult life. His father's voice, his father's ceiling, installed at age 5 and never audited. Now here is the part that matters most. Marcus was not weak. He was not lazy. He was not lacking discipline or desire or work ethic. He had every quality the hustle culture tells you that you need, and still the ceiling held, because the ceiling was not external. It was not in the market or the economy or bad luck or bad timing. It was in the operating system. No amount of harder work will override a program that does not believe you deserve the output. This is the locked door. You have probably felt it. There is something in your financial life that you keep approaching and cannot seem to get through, not because the door is locked from the outside, because somewhere beneath your conscious reasoning, beneath your goals and your spreadsheets and your plans, there is a voice that does not believe you belong on the other side. Every time you get close, some part of you finds a reason to turn back. You call it being realistic. You call it not getting ahead of yourself. You call it being responsible. But the real name for it is older than all of those explanations. Most people spend their entire lives trying to force that door. They try harder. They try louder. They try with more discipline, more sacrifice, more proving. And the door does not move. Because forcing a door that is held shut from the inside is not a strategy. It is exhaustion dressed up as effort. Before long, you will hear a point about willpower and financial change that cuts across the standard story. Once that becomes real to you, it alters how you act every single night before you close your eyes. But for now, stay with the diagnosis. The operating system you are running was written by people who were themselves running an inherited program. Your parents did not hand you scarcity beliefs out of cruelty. They handed you what they were given. Your grandmother's distrust of wealth was not original either. It came from somewhere before her, some season of loss or fear or shame that calcified into a rule. Then the rule became invisible. And invisible rules are the ones that govern everything. This is how financial identity passes through families, not through blood but through repetition and modeling and the quiet authority of people you love. The sleep window changes this, not by force, by access. When you are awake and alert, your conscious mind is standing guard at the door of your beliefs. It evaluates, it debates, it resists. You can tell yourself 100 times that you deserve financial ease, and that conscious guard will raise an objection for every single one. But during sleep, particularly in the moments just before you drop under, and in the theta state that carries you into deep rest, that guard steps away from the door. The beliefs in the basement of your mind become reachable, not by argument, by repetition, by sound, by image, by frequency that bypasses the guard entirely. This is not mysticism. This is how you learned language before you could read. This is how you absorbed your parents' emotional responses before you had words for them. You were not awake and analytical when the original program was written, which means you do not need to be awake and analytical to rewrite it. The hustle-only doctrine will tell you this is passive. It will tell you that real change happens in daylight, through gritted teeth and grinding effort. But that doctrine has never explained why two people with identical work ethics end up in completely different financial positions. It has never explained why some people seem to move toward money easily, not because they work less, but because something inside them does not resist it. That internal non-resistance is not luck. It is a different program running. You are not broken. You are not behind because you failed. You are running a program you never chose, written by people who were themselves written by people before them. And you have been fighting it from the outside while it operates from the inside. The program can be changed. But you cannot change it by force, and you cannot change it alone in the daylight hours. The door is not yours to open by brute strength. What if the door was never yours to open by force? Chapter 3. Sleep is the wealthiest hour you have. Trying harder is not the fastest way to change what you believe about money. That sounds like permission to quit. It is the opposite. It is a statement about where belief actually lives. Not in your discipline, not in your morning routine, not in the number of hours you grind before noon. Belief lives in a layer of your mind you cannot reach by force. And every night you close your eyes, that layer becomes briefly, completely accessible. Most people spend that window unconscious in every sense of the word. They fall asleep rehearsing the same fears they carried all day. They wake up with those fears reinforced, cemented one night deeper into who they are. What if there was a way to use that same window differently? What if you could wake up as someone who genuinely expects money to move toward them rather than away? That is not a rhetorical question. And the answer begins with something your brain does automatically, every single night, whether you know about it or not. Here is the question this chapter is going to sit with for a while before answering. Why do some people seem to change almost overnight, while others grind for years and feel exactly the same inside? Hold that. First, let us talk about what your brain is actually doing in the hour before you lose consciousness. There is a state, right at the edge of sleep, that neuroscientists call the hypnagogic state. The name comes from the Greek words for sleep and leading, literally, the state that leads you into sleep. It lasts, on average, somewhere between 5 and 20 minutes, depending on how tired you are and how quickly you drift. During this window, your brain shifts from the fast, analytical beta waves that dominate your waking hours. It moves into slower alpha waves and then theta waves. These are the same brainwave patterns found during deep meditation, during hypnosis, and during the moments when people report sudden creative breakthroughs that seem to arrive from nowhere. They do not arrive from nowhere. They arrive from the part of your mind that only speaks clearly when the critical, analytical part goes quiet. Think of it like a radio signal that was always broadcasting. The static of your conscious mind was simply too loud to hear it. The critical faculty, the part of your mind that evaluates whether something is true before accepting it, is directly tied to those faster brainwave states. When beta waves drop and theta begins, the critical faculty loosens. It does not disappear entirely, but it softens. It becomes permeable. That permeability is precisely why the hypnagogic state is the most important financial hour of your entire day. Not the hour you spend reviewing your budget. Not the hour you spend reading about investing. Not even the hour you spend working. The hour before you sleep. Now go deeper. After the hypnagogic state, assuming you stay asleep and move through your natural sleep cycles, your brain eventually reaches what is called delta sleep. This is deep, slow-wave sleep. Delta waves are the slowest brainwave pattern measurable in a living person. Your heart rate slows. Your body temperature drops. Your breathing becomes rhythmic and shallow. And your subconscious mind, the part of you that holds your beliefs, your identities, your assumptions about how much money someone like you is supposed to have, runs its consolidation process. Whatever was fed to it during the hypnagogic window gets sorted, stored, and woven into your existing neural architecture during delta sleep. Let that settle for a moment. What you put in during those drowsy, drifting minutes before sleep does not just float away. It gets filed. It gets built into the structure of who you believe you are. This is the mechanism that most people in the world of money and manifestation either skip entirely or explain so vaguely it becomes useless. They tell you to visualize. They tell you to affirm. They do not tell you that visualization and affirmation work vastly differently depending on when you do them. The reason is biological, not spiritual. The biology and the experience of it may feel spiritual. Because what happens to a person whose deepest self begins to hold a different story about who they are can look, from the outside, almost like magic. It is not magic. It is architecture. Remember the version of you waking up each morning from 3 years back. Not geographically. Think about who you believed yourself to be in relation to money. Did you believe, at the cellular level, that financial ease was available to you specifically? Not generally possible for humans, specifically available to you. If you are honest with yourself right now, and the honesty might be uncomfortable, you will probably find that the belief you held then is almost identical to the one you carry now. Even if your income has changed, even if your knowledge has grown, the belief in the basement, the one beneath your thoughts, the one that runs quietly under every financial decision you make, has likely stayed more or less the same. That is not a failure. That is evidence that the basement has not been reprogrammed yet. Here is where the story of Marcus comes in. Marcus worked as a project coordinator in a mid-sized logistics company in a city where the cost of living always seemed to grow faster than his salary. He was not lazy. He read. He listened to everything he could find about building wealth, about investing, about getting ahead. Every morning he wrote down 3 things he was grateful for and 1 financial goal. Every evening he felt a quiet, persistent sense that none of it was actually sticking, like he was painting a wall that was always wet. The paint never dried. He would feel motivated for a day, sometimes 2, and then slide back into the same low-level financial anxiety that had been his baseline since his early 20s. A colleague mentioned something almost offhandedly one afternoon about falling asleep to audio, not podcasts, not stimulating content. Slow, deliberate spoken words about the kind of person he wanted to become, framed in the present tense, played quietly through a single earbud as he drifted off each night. Marcus was skeptical enough that he tried it for only 3 nights before dismissing it. Then, 2 weeks later, he tried it again. This time he kept going, not because something dramatic happened, because something quiet happened. He noticed, about 6 weeks in, that a financial decision he would previously have avoided out of low-grade fear now felt not exciting exactly, but natural, like something a person like him would simply do. He could not point to a lesson he had learned or a book that had changed his mind. The change had happened somewhere he could not see, in the filing room, while he slept. That quiet change is not coincidence. You already know, somewhere in the back of your mind, that willpower alone has limits. You have felt those limits. You have had the experience of knowing exactly what you should do with money, and then not doing it anyway. Not because you lacked information, because something underneath the information did not believe the action was meant for you. That something is your wealth identity. It lives below the reach of conscious effort. Trying to change it with more effort is like trying to repaint a room by standing outside the house and willing the walls to change color. The door into that room opens at night. And now we come back to the question from the beginning of this chapter. Why do some people seem to change almost overnight, while others grind for years and remain unchanged inside? The people who change quickly are not luckier. They are not more disciplined. They are, usually without knowing the formal neuroscience behind it, accessing the reprogramming window. They are doing something in the subconscious hours, intentionally or by fortunate accident, that the grinders are not doing. They are feeding the basement different material at the moment when the basement is actually taking deliveries. The rest of the time, the door is mostly closed. You can knock all day, but at sleep onset, it swings open. So here is what the application actually looks like. In the last 15 minutes before you sleep, your practice is this. You do not review your problems. You do not scroll. You do not run the mental accounting of what went wrong today or what you are afraid of tomorrow. You lie still. You introduce a single, clear idea about who you already are in relationship to money. Not who you are trying to become, who you are. The present tense is not a lie you are telling yourself. It is a signal you are sending to a system that does not understand future tense. The subconscious does not respond to intention. It responds to identity. The signal is simple. You feel yourself as someone for whom money moves, not someone chasing it, someone it moves toward. You hold that feeling in your body, not just in your head, for as long as you can while the drowsiness builds. The drowsiness is not an obstacle. The drowsiness is the mechanism. When you feel your thoughts beginning to lose coherence, when images start to flicker unbidden at the edges of your awareness, when you are no longer quite sure if you are thinking or dreaming, that is the threshold. That is the hypnagogic state, and whatever you are holding in that moment goes in. Do not fight sleep to extend it. Let the feeling carry you under. The delta consolidation that follows will do the rest. This is not a one-night process. Marcus did not change in 3 nights. The basement is layered, and some of what is down there was put there in childhood, in adolescence, in the first apartment you could barely afford. Those layers do not dissolve in a week, but they do dissolve. And they dissolve faster than conscious effort alone can manage, because you are working with the brain's own consolidation system instead of against it. Down the line in this book, you will hear a point about desire, specifically about whether wanting wealth strongly is a help or a hindrance that cuts across the standard story. When that idea snaps into focus, it alters how you behave every single morning. For now, understand this. The hustle-only doctrine, the belief that rest is dead time, that sleep is just recovery before more effort, costs you more than energy. It costs you the only window where the deepest part of your financial identity is soft enough to reshape. Every night you fall asleep without intention, you miss the wealthiest hour of your day. What if tonight you did not miss it? Chapter 4. The basement runs the building. Something is slipping out through the cracks right now. It is not dramatic enough to feel like an emergency. It is quiet. It is steady. And it compounds the way interest does, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of small, invisible withdrawals. Every week you work a strategy that is not producing what you expected. Every plan that stalls, every income stream that sputters, every goal you set in January and quietly buried by March, none of that is neutral. The gap between what you earn and what you could earn is not just a number. It is the freedom you are not buying. It is the options you are not building. What makes this drain so costly is that you cannot see the pipe that is open. You can see the bucket. You can work harder filling it, but until you know what is draining it from the bottom, the work never adds up the way it should. That is the question this chapter is going to answer. Not which bucket to choose, but why the bucket keeps emptying. You have already heard the question the last chapter left behind. What if tonight you did not miss it? That was not a poetic flourish. It was the front edge of something precise. The idea that while you are asleep, something is either working for you or against you. Before you can make sleep do any productive work, you have to understand what is already running in the dark. Here is the thing almost nobody tells you when they teach financial strategy. The tactics are rarely the problem, not the side hustle, not the investment account, not the budget spreadsheet. Those tools are real. They work for some people in certain conditions and they fail for others in ways that look like bad luck but are not. Think about the building you live or work in. The part you see, the floors, the walls, the lighting, the furniture arranged with intention, that is the part you consciously manage. You can rearrange everything up here. You can repaint, remodel, make it look exactly the way a successful person's space should look. But under all of that is a basement you never visit. The plumbing runs through it. The electrical panel lives down there. The foundation itself is down there, holding everything up without anyone asking it to. And if something in that basement is broken, it does not matter how beautiful the floors look above it. Water still rises. Wires still spark. The building eventually tells you what the basement has been doing all along. Your financial life has a basement. You did not design it deliberately. No one does. It was built during the years when you were too young to have any say in the construction, when you were watching how the adults around you handled money, felt about money, argued about money, or went silent whenever money came up. What you absorbed then became code, running, quietly, every day since. Now meet Marcus. Marcus was 29 when he decided the corporate job was costing him more than it was paying. Not just in salary, in time, in energy, in the slow erosion of believing anything better was possible. So he quit. He had a plan. He had savings. He had the kind of focus that made people around him genuinely believe he was about to do something real. He started freelancing first. Graphic design, which he was genuinely skilled at. The first 3 months were good. Clients came. Income came. Then, right around month 4, something shifted. He started undercharging. He started accepting clients who paid late, then not at all. He felt vaguely guilty asking for what he had originally quoted. Projects dragged. His savings thinned. He told himself the market was difficult. He let the freelance work collapse and moved on. He tried e-commerce next. A product he believed in, a lean operation, real early traction. 6 months in, he had a decision to make: reinvest the early profits and scale, or pull back. He pulled back. He told himself it was about risk management, but it was not about the numbers. Something in him hit a ceiling and turned around. Within a year, the store was gone. Third came a real estate partnership. A friend with experience, a solid deal, a reasonable entry point. Marcus got in. Then he got out 3 months before the property turned its first serious profit. The reason he gave his partner was vague. The reason he gave himself was vaguer. But the pattern, if you stood back far enough to see it, was not vague at all. 3 different industries, 3 different strategies, 1 identical outcome. Stop there for a moment. Because this is where most people make the diagnosis wrong. They look at a story like Marcus's and they say the problem was commitment or consistency or courage. They give it a character flaw label and move on. But that is not what happened to Marcus. Marcus had commitment. He had worked harder on those 3 ventures than at anything in his life. What Marcus had, buried in the basement of everything he did, was a story. A story installed before he had the vocabulary to question it. His father had made money twice and lost it twice. Not through laziness. Through a pattern of self-destruction that Marcus had watched up close from age 6 to 17. What he had learned, not in words but in the coded language of observation, was that money past a certain point becomes dangerous. That prosperity is temporary. That the right move when things get good is to prepare for the fall by creating the fall yourself. Marcus did not believe this consciously. Ask him and he would tell you he wanted to be wealthy, that he was doing everything he could. And he was, on the surface. But the basement was running the building. Here is a question worth sitting with for a moment. Think about the last time you had real financial momentum, a month where income was up, or a plan was actually working, or an opportunity showed up that felt genuinely promising. What did you do next? Did you press forward? Did you hesitate? Did you find a reason, a sudden new priority, a technical problem, a relationship complication that arrived almost on schedule to interrupt that momentum? You do not have to answer out loud. Just let the question land where it belongs. The invisible mechanism has a name. Psychologists call it the upper limit. Not a ceiling imposed from outside, but a threshold installed inside, the level of prosperity, success, or ease that your basement programming has decided is the safe limit. Cross it and an internal alarm goes off. You do not hear the alarm consciously. You just start to act in ways that bring you back down to what feels familiar. You get sick. You start a fight. You lose the contract. You self-sabotage so naturally that it looks like circumstance. And here is the part that nobody in the hustle conversation ever addresses. Hustle does not fix this. Working harder does not fix this. Waking up at 5 in the morning does not fix this. Grinding through the discomfort does not fix this. Because the harder you push against a subconscious ceiling, the more pressure builds behind it, and the stronger the snapback becomes when it finally comes. The hustle-only doctrine assumes that the obstacle is always external, always about effort, strategy, timing, or connections. It treats rest as wasted time and sleep as the gap between sessions of real work. But sleep is where the basement can be reached, not metaphorically, neurologically. During deep sleep, your brain does something your waking mind cannot do. It consolidates, it rewires. The neural pathways that fire throughout the day get either strengthened or weakened during those slow wave and REM cycles, depending on what input preceded them. Your subconscious wealth programming, the code that tells you how much money is safe, what kind of person you are allowed to become, how much is too much, is not locked away in some inaccessible vault. It is written in patterns of neural activity that sleep both revisits and rewrites. This is why what you think about, hear, and feel in the hour before sleep is not a casual ritual. It is renovation work on the basement. This is why the sleep window matters, not because of mysticism, because of the way consolidation actually functions. The mind that drifts toward sleep carries something with it, and that something gets pressed deeper. If what you carry is the day's anxiety, the accumulated evidence that money is hard and scarce and you are behind, then that gets pressed deeper too. But if what you carry is a different signal, a different story about who you are in relation to money and what is available to you, then the consolidation process works in your favor. The question opened at the beginning of this chapter was this: why does the bucket keep emptying? The answer is not that you are choosing wrong buckets. The answer is that the drainage mechanism is below the floor you can see. Marcus did not need a better business idea. He needed the basement to stop running the old code his father accidentally handed him. A little later, you will run into an idea about desire and wanting, about what it actually means to want wealth that overturns the common assumption. Once that lands, it starts changing how you act every single time money is within your reach. But for now, hold this. Every strategy that fails is defeated by a deeper story. Not the wrong tactic, not bad timing, not the market, the economy, or the competition. A story. Running below everything, quietly in the basement, faithfully doing the only job it was ever programmed to do, which is to make sure the building above it stays exactly as familiar as it has always been. The building can be renovated. The basement can be reprogrammed. And the best time to do that work is the hours when the conscious mind steps back. The noise of the day goes still, and the basement finally becomes accessible. What story is yours telling tonight while you sleep? Chapter 5. Frequencies you tune without knowing. The story you told yourself before you closed your eyes last night already decided what today would feel like. That sounds like something printed on a motivational calendar. It is not. It is a description of a neurological process that has been running inside you every single night for years. It shapes the emotional baseline you wake up with. And through that baseline, it quietly directs every financial decision you make before you even pour your first cup of coffee. Here is what most people miss entirely. They believe money responds to effort. Work harder, earn more. Put in the hours, get the result. And effort matters, of course it does. But effort executed from the wrong emotional frequency produces a fraction of the outcome that the same effort, applied from the right frequency, generates with ease. You have probably already experienced this. There are days when everything flows. The right email arrives at the right moment. The conversation you were dreading turns into an opportunity, and there are days when the exact same actions produce nothing. Same you, same work, different result. The variable is not the effort. The variable is the frequency you are broadcasting from the inside. That is the open question this chapter is going to answer. What is your current emotional frequency around money? And how do you change it before the most important window of your day, the hours just before and during sleep? Look back at the life you were living before these last 3 years unfolded. Not what you owned or where you worked. How you felt when the topic of money came up. Not the words you said, the feeling underneath the words. Was it tightness in the chest? A low hum of anxiety you had learned to ignore? A vague sense that other people understood something about money that you had not been told? Most people, when they are honest, recognize that feeling instantly, because it never really went away. It just got covered over by routines and distractions and the noise of the day. That feeling is a frequency, and frequency is not a metaphor here. It is closer to a precise description of something measurable happening in your nervous system. Your body holds emotional states the way a tuning fork holds a pitch. Strike it once, and it keeps vibrating long after the initial contact. The financial anxiety you absorbed watching your parents argue about bills, the embarrassment of a declined card, the shame of a loan you could not repay, these experiences did not just pass through you. They struck a note, and your system kept vibrating at that pitch. Night after night, as you drifted into sleep, that vibration went with you into the basement. You have heard about the basement before in this book, the subconscious level where your identity around money lives, where the programs run without asking your permission. The basement does not care about your affirmations. Say all you want, out loud in the mirror with conviction that you are wealthy and deserving and open to receive. If the frequency underneath those words is quiet desperation, the basement catalogs the desperation, not the words, the feeling. Always the feeling. Here is where something important needs to land clearly. Money does not follow affirmations. Money follows the emotional state you hold most consistently, not the one you perform for 10 minutes each morning, the one running quietly underneath everything, the one your body defaults to when no one is watching, the one that hums in the background of every money-related thought you have across the entire day and into the night. A woman named Celeste learned this the hard way over the course of 3 years. Celeste had read every book, followed every system, typed out her financial goals on index cards and kept them on the bathroom mirror. She visualized the house, the number in the account, the specific feeling of freedom. She said the affirmations with conviction. She tracked her money, cut expenses, took the side income seriously. None of it moved, not meaningfully. Small improvements here and there, but nothing that matched the intensity of her effort or the sincerity of her desire. What Celeste had not noticed, and what no one around her had the language to describe, was the emotional signal running underneath all that work. Every time she visualized the house, there was a flicker of doubt that arrived about 4 seconds into the image. A whisper that said this is pretend. Every time she said the affirmations, her nervous system cross-referenced them against her bank account and produced a contradiction signal. The affirmation said abundance. The body said not yet. The basement recorded not yet. 3 years of consistent programming, not toward wealth. Toward the state of wanting wealth and not having it yet. After the parable ends, something becomes clear. What Celeste was broadcasting was not prosperity. She was broadcasting the experience of longing for prosperity. And the signal you broadcast is what your circumstances, your choices, your instincts, and the people you attract all tend to match. So the question is not how to want money more clearly. The question is how to stop broadcasting longing and start broadcasting resonance. These are completely different frequencies. Resonance is what happens when you feel the emotional truth of something before it is physically present. This is not fantasy or denial. It is closer to what a musician does when they tune their instrument before the performance. The song does not exist yet in the room, but the instrument is ready. The frequency is set, and when the moment comes, the sound is true. Your pre-sleep hours are the most precise tuning window you have. The science here is not mystical, it is architectural. In the 40 minutes before sleep, your brainwave activity begins descending from the fast, analytical beta state into slower alpha and then theta frequencies. In theta, the critical filter between conscious intention and subconscious recording softens. What you feel during that descent goes deeper. It bypasses the skeptic. It reaches the basement directly. Most people spend this window scrolling, watching something mildly distressing or mildly meaningless, replaying the friction of the day, calculating tomorrow's problems. All of that gets recorded. The basement takes notes. And because the basement does not have a strong preference for what it records, only a preference for what is most emotionally charged and most repeated, it faithfully archives whatever frequency you were holding as you fell under. You can use this deliberately. You can tune the instrument before you sleep. The pre-sleep emotional calibration sequence is not complicated, but it requires you to understand what you are actually doing. You are not visualizing outcomes. You are not listing what you are grateful for, though gratitude can be part of this. You are generating a specific felt experience in your body and holding it steady long enough for it to register at the subconscious level. You are choosing what the basement records tonight. Here is how it works in practice. Approximately 30 minutes before you intend to sleep, begin reducing incoming information. Not because screens are the enemy, but because the calibration requires your nervous system to shift out of reactive mode. Reactive mode cannot tune. It can only respond. You are not trying to respond to anything right now. You are trying to initiate. Lie down before you are fully exhausted. This matters more than people realize. If you wait until you are barely conscious, you have missed the tuning window. The descent into theta needs to be one you are present for, even if only briefly. Then you do something that sounds almost too simple. Locate one genuine memory or imagined scene in which you felt financially secure. Not rich, not extraordinary, secure. The specific feeling of having enough. Maybe a moment when a bill was paid and there was still money left. Maybe a time when an unexpected check arrived. Maybe just a morning when you woke up and money was not the first thought in your mind. Small is fine, real is everything. The emotional truth of the scene is the signal. The scale of the scene is irrelevant. Hold that feeling, not the picture. The feeling. Let it occupy your chest, your breathing, the space between your shoulders. If doubt interrupts, do not fight it, just return to the feeling. You are not arguing with the doubt. You are simply choosing where to place your attention. 30 seconds of genuine resonance before sleep is worth more than 30 minutes of reluctant affirmation in the morning. Do this consistently, night after night, and the basement begins to receive a different set of recordings. Not recordings of longing, recordings of sufficiency. And the subconscious, which runs your default emotional state, begins to recalibrate around what it hears most often. This is where the motif of the locked door becomes relevant in a way you may not fully appreciate yet. Earlier in this book, the locked door appeared as a barrier, something standing between you and the financial life you want. You have been trying to find the key, trying different approaches, different strategies, different levels of effort. Further on, You will run into an idea about why that door remains locked that overturns the common assumption. When that becomes clear, it starts changing how you act every single morning. But for now, understand this. The frequency you hold is not a key. It is something more fundamental. It determines whether you still believe the door is locked at all. Wealth frequency is not a state you perform during designated practice sessions. It is the emotional atmosphere you build around your daily life, slowly and deliberately, through the choices you make about what you feed the basement during the hours when your defenses are down and the signal goes straight through. The hustle doctrine has told you that rest is where nothing happens. Rest is where you recover to go back to work. Rest is the pause between productive episodes. This is the lie at the center of everything that has kept you circling the same financial patterns year after year. Rest is not a pause in the process. Rest is where the process does its deepest work. What you feel as you fall asleep tonight will be running in the basement for the next 7 hours, either reinforcing the frequency that has kept your finances exactly where they are, or slowly, precisely, beginning to tune something different. Celeste eventually stopped saying the affirmations. She stopped visualizing the house. She started instead doing one small, honest thing every night, finding one true feeling of sufficiency and holding it on purpose until sleep arrived. Within 6 months, she had not manifested a mansion, but she had made 3 financial decisions almost without thinking that she would never have made before, and each one was correct. Her instincts had changed, not because the circumstances changed first, because the frequency changed first. Your emotional state is the attractor. Not the loudest prayer, not the longest vision board, not the most disciplined spreadsheet. The state you hold most consistently is what your life tends to organize itself around. What frequency is running in your basement right now? Chapter 6. Affirmations lie, impressions stick. Something is running right now that you cannot hear. It has been running since before you woke up this morning. It ran while you were sleeping, while you were eating breakfast, while you were going through the motions of a day that may have felt, if you are honest, a little too familiar. Right now, there is a signal playing in the deep structure of your mind. That signal is shaping every financial decision you will make today. Not dramatically, not consciously, quietly, constantly, invisibly. And here is what makes that fact urgent rather than simply interesting. Every morning you wake up and recite something you do not yet believe. The gap between where you are and where you want to be does not stay the same size. It grows. Compounding works in both directions. The wrong frequency, running unchallenged in your basement day after day, is not a neutral condition. It is a cost, and that cost has a name, even if no one has shown you the mechanism behind it. That is what this chapter is about. That last question, what frequency is running in your basement right now, was not rhetorical. It was pointing at something real. The basement is not a metaphor for motivation or mood. It is the operating layer beneath your conscious thinking. It is the part of your mind that decides what is normal before your waking self gets a vote. And most people have never once deliberately chosen what plays down there. Here is what most people do instead. They find something that sounds like an answer. Something clean and accessible and easy to begin at any time of day. They write a list of statements, strong statements, positive ones. They say them out loud, sometimes into a mirror, sometimes in the car, sometimes in the space between hitting snooze and actually getting up. And they feel something in those moments, a flicker, a sense of possibility. So they keep going, a week, a month, sometimes much longer than that, and nothing changes, not nothing in the dramatic sense. They feel temporarily better. They feel like they are doing something, but their bank account does not shift. Their relationship with money does not shift. The quiet anxiety that arrives every time a bill lands does not shift. And eventually, if they are honest with themselves, a different and much darker thought arrives. The thought that maybe this does not work, that maybe they are broken, that maybe the problem is something deeper and more permanent than any set of words could fix. That thought is half right. It is deeper than words, but it is not permanent. Meet Diane. She was 31, working a decent job in a mid-sized marketing firm, earning enough to cover her life but never enough to move it. She had read 3 books on wealth and mindset. She had downloaded 2 apps. And for just over 12 months, every morning before her phone fully lit up, she said her affirmations, specific ones, written in the present tense exactly the way every guide told her to write them. Money flows to me easily. I am financially free. I attract wealth in every area of my life. She said them with her eyes open. She said them with her eyes closed. She tried writing them out. She tried recording herself and playing it back. A full year Diane gave this practice. And at the end of that year, she had the same salary, the same savings balance, and a new, low-grade conviction that she simply was not the kind of person money came easily to. She did not fail the practice. The practice failed her. But why? Why would a sincere person, genuinely committed, doing exactly what was recommended, end up with the same result? Here is the answer, and it changes everything. The conscious mind and the subconscious mind are not the same listener. When you say an affirmation out loud during your waking hours, your conscious mind hears it clearly. But the conscious mind is also the part that audits, filters, compares, and contradicts. It hears you say money flows to me easily, and in the same breath, with no cruelty at all, it notices that the last 3 months of bank statements tell a different story. The conscious mind does not block the affirmation out of stubbornness. It blocks it out of accuracy. It is doing its job, and its job is to measure what you say against what it already knows to be true. The subconscious does not work that way. The subconscious does not compare. It does not audit. It does not argue back. It accepts impressions. It stores them as identity. And it operates most powerfully, most openly, most receptively during one specific window that most people sleep straight through without ever using. The window is sleep onset. That 10 to 20-minute corridor between wakefulness and sleep. When your body is still, your analytical mind has begun to release its grip, but the deeper layer is still listening. That is the most fertile ground your mind will offer you in any 24-hour period. The resistance is down. The filter is resting. What you impress upon yourself in that window does not get checked against your current reality. It gets filed as identity, not something you believe. Something you are. Now meet Marcus. 29, working freelance design, income inconsistent, confidence around money even more inconsistent. Marcus had the same starting conditions as Diane in most of the ways that matter. Same educated understanding of how wealth building was supposed to work. Same frustration that the understanding was not translating into results. But Marcus had heard something specific about the sleep window, and he decided to take it seriously for 30 days. He did not recite affirmations in the morning. He did not use an app. Each night, in the last few minutes before sleep, he chose one single impression. Not a list. One. Something precise and physically imaginable. The weight of a particular decision he had already made well. The feeling in his chest of having moved forward on something he had been avoiding. The sensation in his hands of holding a contract he had signed, a client he had landed, a transaction that had cleared. He did not say words. He built sensation. And he carried that sensation right into the edge of sleep, letting it be the last thing running when the waking world dissolved. 30 days. At the end of 30 days, Marcus had not won the lottery. He had not manifested a check from nowhere. But something had shifted in how he moved. He pitched a client he would have talked himself out of approaching before. He named a rate he would have lowered out of habit. He held a boundary in a negotiation that his previous self would have released inside of 30 seconds. He did not feel like he was performing confidence. He felt like he was acting from a different ground, because he was. The impression had gone into the basement, and the basement was running a different frequency. Think about the last time you tried to believe something about yourself that felt like a lie. You said the words. They felt hollow. You said them again, still hollow. You pushed through anyway because someone told you the feeling would catch up eventually. Did it? Or did the hollow feeling just become the texture of the practice until you quietly stopped? That hollow feeling is information. It is your conscious mind doing its audit, finding the gap between the claim and the current reality and flagging the discrepancy. The problem was never your sincerity. The problem was the timing and the channel. Impressions during sleep onset bypass the audit entirely. And here is the second component that Marcus used, the one that separates an impression from a simple visualization exercise. Emotion, not manufactured enthusiasm, not performed joy. Real, embodied, physical sensation tied to the image. The subconscious does not file neutral information as identity. It files charged information. Memories that carry feeling are the ones that shape who you believe yourself to be, which means the impression you build at sleep onset must carry a felt sense, something your body recognizes as real, for it to land deep enough to stick. Repetition with emotion during sleep onset burns identity deeper than any waking mantra. That is not a belief. That is the mechanism. That is what Diane missed and what Marcus found. Now here is the open loop this chapter started pulling at. You may have already wondered whether this is just a gentler version of the same thing, a slightly better affirmation, dressed up in the language of neuroscience. It is not. The distinction is structural, not stylistic. Affirmations operate at the surface. They request a change from an unchanged system. Impressions operate below the request layer. They install the change at the level where identity is stored. The locked door between where you are financially and where you want to be is not a door you need better words to open. It is a door your impressed identity eventually stops needing a key for at all. Diane is still out there somewhere, probably still reaching for a different version of the same practice. Marcus is already different on the inside, and his outside is beginning to catch up. The distance between them is not talent or luck or deserving. The distance is one specific technique, used in one specific window, with one specific ingredient that makes the impression real rather than recited. Soon, you will run into an idea about desire and wealth that overturns the common assumption. After that clicks, it starts changing how you use the sleep window every single night. But for now, one question lives at the threshold of sleep tonight. What will you choose to impress? Chapter 7. The script you play before midnight. Trying harder before bed is costing you money. That sounds like the advice a lazy person gives to justify stopping early. It is not. It is a precise observation about what your brain does in the hour before sleep. Pouring anxious planning into that hour is the financial equivalent of digging a hole in the floor you just built. The effort you are adding is undoing the structure beneath it. Once you understand the mechanism, everything changes. Once you see exactly what that pre-sleep window is doing to your relationship with money, You will stop treating those final 20 minutes like dead time to fill with worry. You will start treating them like the most valuable minutes in your entire financial day. That question of what those 20 minutes are actually worth, in real, measurable terms of what gets encoded and what gets quietly erased, that is where this chapter begins. The answer will feel uncomfortable at first. Then it will feel like relief. You chose to impress something. You chose it. What you decide to impress onto the deepest layer of your mind determines what wakes up running in the morning. Not your alarm, not your intention, the impression you left last. Think about the last time you lay in bed staring at the ceiling, not sleeping, not planning, just running the same number through your head, the rent amount, the credit balance, the gap between what is in your account and what needs to be there. You were not solving anything. You know that now. But your brain did not know the difference between thinking about a problem and experiencing it. It recorded everything. The tight chest, the shallow breath, the story that said you were not quite enough to make this work. It filed all of that neatly in the basement of your subconscious. And it reinforced the same walls that have been keeping the wealth signal out since you were old enough to hear adults argue about money in the other room. That is the cost, not just one bad night. Every night that ends in financial anxiety is a night you paid for with your future. Here is the open loop to carry through the next few minutes. There is a specific order to the pre-sleep protocol that matters more than the content of it. Most people who try visualization get the content right and the order completely wrong. The order is the difference between planting a seed and planting it upside down. You will know the correct sequence before this chapter ends. And once you know it, you will never do it the other way again. But first you need to understand what you are working with. Your brain, in the final minutes before sleep, shifts into a state that neuroscientists call hypnagogia. The critical, analytical layer starts to thin. The part of you that filters and doubts and says, "Be realistic," begins to go quiet. What remains is something closer to the basement itself. The raw, unguarded subconscious that runs your financial behavior from the floor below where you can consciously see. Reaching that layer while awake is difficult. In that pre-sleep window, it is not only possible, it is automatic. The door is open. The only question is what you are walking through it. Right now, most people walk fear through it. Marcus was 29 years old and worked as a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company in Atlanta. He was good at his job. He got consistent raises, and every single night, without fail, he would lie in bed and mentally audit his day, cataloging every missed opportunity, every invoice that wasn't paid yet, every bill that was 3 weeks out but still somehow pressing on him in the dark. He called it staying on top of things. His therapist called it rumination. Both of them were right. What neither of them named was the financial effect. Every night he was printing the same limiting instruction into his subconscious basement before the door swung shut. Marcus wasn't building clarity. He was reinforcing the architecture of scarcity. He heard about the pre-sleep window from a colleague who had started paying off debt faster than seemed reasonable given her salary. He was skeptical. He tried it anyway, mostly because he was tired of being tired. Within 6 weeks, he noticed something he could not fully explain. He was making different choices without deciding to. He turned down a purchase he would have made without blinking 3 months earlier. He asked for a project bonus he had never had the nerve to request. He said yes to a second freelance client when before he would have talked himself out of the complexity. Nothing external had changed. The basement had. Now let the parable settle for a second before you pick up the mechanics. What Marcus did, what actually shifted the architecture, was simpler than you expect. And the simplicity is not a flaw. It is the point. Here is how the pre-sleep protocol works. Not in theory. Tonight, 20 minutes before you intend to sleep, you stop all screens. Not because screens are villains in themselves, but because the blue light signal tells your brain it is mid-afternoon. You need your brain to begin crossing toward that hypnagogic threshold, not holding the door shut. Put the phone face down. Close the laptop. The feed can wait. What you are about to do is worth more than anything in it. Now lie down or sit comfortably in the dark or near dark. You are not meditating in any formal sense. You are preparing a scene. The scene is specific. This matters enormously. Vague images produce vague impressions. Your subconscious does not respond to concepts. It responds to sensory detail. The smell of a room, the weight of something in your hand, the particular quality of light through a particular window. So you build a scene that represents financial ease, not fantasy wealth that feels so foreign it triggers disbelief. A scene just enough ahead of where you are now that it feels like a plausible next chapter. Maybe it is opening an app and seeing a number that makes you exhale instead of tense. Maybe it is sitting at a table with someone you respect, being asked for your expertise. Maybe it is writing a check that clears without you checking twice. Choose one. One scene only. Complexity is the enemy of impression. Feel it. This is not a visualization exercise where you watch yourself from outside like a movie. You are inside the scene. You are the one holding the phone. You are the one sitting at the table. The difference between watching and inhabiting is the difference between reading a menu and tasting the food. Your nervous system needs the taste. Spend 2 to 3 minutes building the sensory texture of that scene. The weight of the chair, the temperature of the room, the sound or the quiet. Breathe normally. Let the feeling come up first, and then let the image follow it. Emotion is what your subconscious encodes most readily. This is the wealth frequency, not a mystical signal, but a specific emotional register of ease and competence and forward movement. Your subconscious stores it and then tries to recreate it during your waking hours. Revisit to your financial reality before these last 3 years moved. Think about the decisions you made, the ones that felt automatic, the ones you didn't really choose so much as fall into. How many of those were shaped by something running below your conscious awareness? Some old recording about what people like you do with money, about what is realistic for someone at your level. That recording came from somewhere. It was encoded in moments exactly like the one you are preparing for tonight. The only difference is that tonight you are choosing what gets recorded. This is the revelation, and it is quieter than you might expect. You have already been running a pre-sleep script every night of your adult life. It was just never written by you. After the scene, after the feeling, comes the part that most people skip. It is the most important part of the sequence: release. You do not grip the scene. You do not hold it with effort or stare at it with concentration. You let it go. You say to whatever part of you is listening, I have seen it. Now I am going to sleep. And you mean it. The release is not giving up. It is trust. You are handing the instruction to the part of your mind that works while your conscious self goes offline. That part cannot do its work while you are still hovering over it, checking the progress, adjusting the image, anxiously repeating the scene in case it didn't take. Letting go is not passive. It is the final and most precise act in the whole protocol. Impress, inhabit, release. That is the sequence. That is what was wrong with every visualization attempt that didn't move anything. The content was fine. The order was broken. People were impressing without inhabiting, or inhabiting without releasing, or releasing before the impression had time to settle. Now you have the correct order. Now the door you have been standing in front of, the locked door that felt like it required some key you never received. You are beginning to understand that the lock was never on the door. It was on the hour before you closed your eyes. Later on, you will run into an idea about taking action toward money that overturns the common assumption. Once you grasp that turn, it starts changing how you move through an entire workday. But tonight, before any of that, you have one task: 20 minutes, a scene with texture, a feeling you inhabit instead of observe, and a release that is not surrender but instruction. The last 20 minutes before sleep are the most financially valuable minutes of your day. Everything else you do tomorrow builds on what you plant tonight. Chapter 8. Morning proves what night planted. Something is leaving you right now, and it has no sound. Not money exactly. Not yet. Something that comes before money. It is the moments in your day where the right thought should have surfaced but did not. The conversation you almost started but talked yourself out of. The idea that flickered at 7 in the morning while you were still half asleep and then disappeared before you could hold it. That flicker is not a small thing. It is the signal. Without knowing what it is or how to read it, you walk past it every single day. That cost compounds. Quietly and without fanfare, it stacks. Those morning moments, those few seconds between sleep and full waking, are the only window in your entire day when the subconscious basement speaks loud enough to hear. Most people are already reaching for their phones before the basement finishes its sentence. This chapter is about learning to listen in that window. And more than that, it is about learning to recognize what has already changed in you, even before a single bank notification confirms it. The proof appears in the morning, not in your account balance. Here is what you need to understand first. If the work happens during sleep, how do you ever know if it is working? That question is more important than it sounds. Hold it. Marcus had been running the nighttime protocol for 13 days when he noticed the first thing. He had not been tracking carefully. He was 31, working a facilities management job at a mid-size office building in Cincinnati, and he had started the sleep reprogramming practice out of something closer to quiet desperation than confidence. He owed $8,000 on 2 credit cards. His car needed brake work he kept postponing. He was not failing dramatically. He was failing the slow way, the invisible way, the way where nothing is technically wrong except that nothing is moving either. On the 13th day, he woke up at 6:42 in the morning with a specific name in his head: 𝗜𝗢𝗥𝗧𝗘, a contractor he had met once at a building trade show 2 years earlier. Someone who had handed him a card and said, "If you ever want to talk about going independent, call me." Marcus had thrown the card away. He had not thought about 𝗜𝗢𝗥𝗧𝗘 in 18 months. But that morning the name was just there, clear, not urgent, not anxious, simply present the way a fact is present. Marcus did not call immediately. He made coffee, fed his dog, stood at the window for a few minutes, and then he sat down and found 𝗜𝗢𝗥𝗧𝗘 on LinkedIn and sent a short message. 3 days later they had a phone call. 6 weeks after that, Marcus was taking on his first independent facilities contract on weekends, billing at a rate 60% higher than his hourly wage. Nothing about that outcome was inevitable. But the name surfacing on morning 13 was not random either. That is what reprogramming looks like from the outside. Not a thunderclap, a name. Now let one beat pass on that story before moving forward, because what just happened in Marcus's life is easy to dismiss, and dismissing it is exactly what keeps people exactly where they are. Turn back to 3 years ago without cleaning it up this week. Not emotionally, not philosophically, practically. What was your first thought most mornings? Was it a problem, a number, a person you were frustrated with. The morning thought is not decoration. It is data. It tells you the frequency your subconscious basement was broadcasting. The basement does not wait for you to ask. It transmits automatically every morning before the conscious mind has fully arrived for the day. 3 years ago, what was transmitting? And what is transmitting now? This is the mirror moment the whole chapter builds toward. The gap between those two answers is the gap between where you were and where you are. And if the night work is taking hold, that gap should be narrowing in a specific direction. Here is the mechanism. During the sleep window, particularly in the 90 minutes before you naturally wake, your brain is cycling through lighter stages of sleep, moving back toward the threshold of consciousness. The basement is sorting. It is filing, connecting, running patterns. What you planted before sleep is being woven into that architecture, not metaphorically, neurologically. The images you held, the feelings you rehearsed, the identity statements you repeated quietly before your eyes closed, they are being consolidated. The basement is treating them the way it treats everything it decides to keep. By morning, that material has been integrated one layer deeper. And the evidence is not subtle if you know where to look. It shows up as an impulse toward something you would previously have ignored. It shows up as a question you suddenly want to ask someone, where before you would have stayed quiet. It shows up as a name. It shows up as a route you decide to drive to work that takes you past a building with a sign in the window. It shows up as the moment you open your mouth in a meeting and say something you had not planned to say, and the room shifts. None of that looks like manifestation the way movies portray it. There is no swelling music. There is no sudden check in the mailbox. There is just a slightly different you making slightly different micro-decisions throughout the day. And those micro-decisions compound the same way the loss compounds. Only now it is compounding in your favor. The hustle-only doctrine has no language for this. It says results come from effort. Effort is visible. If you cannot point to the hours you worked, then nothing real happened. Rest is a debt you pay back when the work is done. Sleep is maintenance, not production. And so the richest reprogramming window in your entire 24 hours gets treated like a gap between productive sessions. That doctrine is not wrong about effort. Effort matters, but it has the sequence backwards. Effort that comes from a reprogrammed basement is directed effort. It points towards something real. Effort that comes from an unchanged basement is exhausting effort. It spins, it stalls, it produces activity without traction. Eventually, the person doing it concludes they are simply not the type of person who gets ahead. They are not wrong about what they experienced. They are wrong about the cause. You are not behind because you did not work hard enough. You are behind because the basement was running the wrong program while the effort happened. Hard work through a filter of scarcity produces scarcity more efficiently. That is not a punishment. That is just how filters function. Change the filter first. Then the same effort produces different output. Now, back to the question from earlier. How do you know if the night work is working? You track the mornings, not in a complicated way. You do not need a spreadsheet. You need 30 seconds and enough honesty to notice what is actually there. When you wake up tomorrow, before you reach for anything, before you move into the obligations of the day, sit still for 30 seconds. Notice what your first unprompted thought is, not the thought you choose, the thought that was already there when you arrived. If that thought is a problem, note it. Do not fight it. Do not judge it, just note it. If that thought is a possibility, a name, an idea, a direction, a quiet pull towards something, note it. Write it down if you have something nearby. Then honor it. Follow the thread even a small distance. Send the message. Look up the thing. Ask the question. The morning thought after 11 or 12 nights of the sleep protocol will not feel like a revelation. It will feel like a small, quiet thought. That is the correct size for it to feel. Small, quiet things from the right source build differently than loud, urgent things from the wrong source. Marcus did not feel certainty when he sat down to find 𝗜𝗢𝗥𝗧𝗔𝗡 on LinkedIn. He felt a mild, uncomplicated interest. That mild, uncomplicated interest was the new basement speaking. It did not need to be louder. Loud had never worked for Marcus. Loud had always been fear in a faster voice. The quiet pull is the signal. Now here is something worth naming directly. You may be 10 or 12 days into the practice and think it is not working because nothing dramatic has occurred. The cards are the same. The account is the same. The job is the same. You may be right that nothing external has shifted yet. But if your morning thoughts have changed even slightly, if there is one thing that surfaces now that would not have surfaced before, then the basement has already moved. The external world is just on a slight delay. It always is. It responds to a version of you that has been consistent long enough to be credible. The door does not open until the frequency of your knock matches the frequency of what is behind it. And you have been changing your frequency, one night at a time, while you slept. As this book keeps moving, you will run into an idea about timing, about how long real change takes, and when to expect it that overturns the common assumption. When that point settles, it starts changing how you act in the final stretch before results arrive. But tonight the work is simple. You plant, the night processes, the morning speaks. You have been learning to plant with precision. Now you learn to listen with precision. The same care you bring to the protocol before sleep, bring it to the first 30 seconds of waking. That window is the redoubt. It tells you what took root. And what took root is what grows. The basement has been changing. You can feel it or you cannot yet, but the mornings will tell you either way. The evidence of night reprogramming does not arrive in a notification. It arrives in the first unchosen thought of a new day. That thought is the morning report from a basement that is finally, quietly, starting to work for you. What does yours say tomorrow? Chapter 9. You stopped forcing, money followed. Every society that has survived long enough to leave a record contains this same story. A person strains against something invisible. They push harder than anyone around them. They bleed effort into a wall that will not move. And then, at some point no historian can precisely locate, they stop. Not from defeat, from understanding. Something shifts inside them, and the wall, without anyone touching it, opens. This pattern is not metaphor. It is not mythology. It is the most practical thing you have ever heard, dressed in ancient clothes. The question running underneath every chapter of this book, every sleep window you have entered, every quiet moment of reprogramming in your basement mind is this: when does the forcing stop and the flow begin? You are now at that answer. What does yours say tomorrow? That question the last chapter left you with, it was not rhetorical. Tomorrow is not a blank day. Tomorrow is a day shaped by what you are becoming right now, in this moment, while you listen. Here is something you need to sit with for a second. Return to the life you were living before these last 3 years unfolded, not in terms of money or achievement, just in terms of how you felt inside when you thought about your financial life. Was there a tightness in your chest? A low hum of embarrassment you carried into rooms and tried to hide? Maybe you worked more than almost anyone you knew, and the numbers still did not match the effort. That feeling had a name, even if you never said it out loud. You believed the door to a different life was locked. You did not have the key, so you knocked louder and longer and harder, hoping the sound alone would be enough. It never was. That is the cost no one discusses honestly. The cost of effort aimed at the wrong mechanism. You were not lazy. You were not unintelligent. You were pushing a door from the outside that only opens from the inside. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus grew up watching his father work 2 jobs. Not because his father was careless with money, but because his father carried a belief deeper than any bank account, that more hours was the only honest answer to financial struggle. Marcus inherited that belief the way children inherit facial features. Silently, permanently. By his late 20s, Marcus had 3 income streams, a planner full of goals, and a persistent feeling that he was running on a treadmill bolted to the floor. He was moving. He was exhausted. He was not going anywhere. One night Marcus stopped, not because he planned to. His body simply refused the next alarm. He slept 9 hours for the first time in years. When he woke, he did not feel guilty, which surprised him. He felt something closer to clarity. Over the following weeks, he did something strange. He started protecting his sleep the way he used to protect his work hours. He began treating the night as productive time, not for tasks, but for something quieter and more important. He stopped explaining this to people who would not understand. He just did it. 6 months later, a contract arrived that Marcus had sent one email about 7 months prior and mostly forgotten. It was worth more than he had made the year before. He did not know how to explain it, so he stopped trying. He accepted it. What changed was not his calendar. What changed was his frequency. That word, frequency, has been floating through this book for a reason. Not as a spiritual abstraction, but as a precise description of something real. The basement of your mind, the deep subconscious architecture you have been quietly reprogramming through the sleep window, operates on a signal. That signal either matches wealth or it does not. For most of your life, if you were raised inside the hustle-only doctrine, your signal was broadcasting something like this. Money is hard, rest is waste. I am always almost enough but not quite there. That signal is invisible. It is also the most powerful force in your financial life. Here is the open loop this chapter needs to close. Back in the early pages of this book, there was a door. A locked door standing between you and a life that felt financially easy instead of financially desperate. You have been carrying the image of that door since chapter 2. You have probably imagined yourself knocking on it, searching for the key, wondering if someone else got one and you did not. Here is what is true. The lock was never on the outside. There is no key because the door does not work that way. The lock sits on the interior side in the basement, in the part of you that runs while you are unconscious. Every night you have spent doing the work this book describes, you have been moving toward that lock from the inside. Not breaking it, not forcing it, turning it, gently, repeatedly, until it releases. Marcus did not find a key. Marcus walked through. You are now at that door from a different angle than you have ever stood before. You are not outside it, exhausted, knocking. You are inside the building. You always were. You just did not know which hallway led to the lock. The hustle that never worked was effort against a closed door. The door is now open from the inside. Hear this clearly. This is not the same as doing nothing. Action still matters. But the action you take from this new position is a different category of action. It lands differently. It finds purchase. It compounds. The same phone call you made 6 months ago and got no response, made now from this internal alignment, finds someone ready to answer. Why? Because what you carry into every interaction is no longer desperation wrapped in strategy. It is confidence that does not need to perform. It is wealth consciousness assembled quietly, night by night, in the sleep window, in the basement of your mind, without your conscious effort fighting it at every turn. There is no word for how different this feels until you feel it, and you are beginning to feel it. That is not wishful thinking. That is the only honest description of what happens when the reprogramming takes hold. You stopped explaining yourself so much, did you notice that? You stopped rehearsing arguments for why you deserve things. You stopped shrinking your requests before you made them. These are not personality changes. These are the outer surface of an inner shift. The basement changed. The upstairs followed. The mirror moment is this. Think about the last financial opportunity you let pass because something in you said you were not ready. Not the version of you that checked your bank balance and said the math is wrong. The deeper version. The one that whispered, "You are not the kind of person who gets that." That whisper came from the basement, and the basement no longer sounds like it used to. In a later section, you will run into an idea about taking action that overturns the common assumption. After that really registers, it starts changing every decision you make from this point forward. For now, stay with what this chapter has delivered. You spent years believing the door required something you did not have. A credential, a connection, a stroke of luck, a number in an account that unlocked the next number. What you actually needed was inside the building the entire time. And the work you did while you slept, the quiet, invisible, underestimated work of rewriting the signal your basement broadcasts into every room you enter, that work has been turning the lock. You are not the same person who started this book. The door is open. Walk through without looking for the key you no longer need. Chapter 10. Sleep rich, wake unrecognizable. You made it to the last page. Something about that fact is worth pausing on. Most people don't make it here. They start. They feel the pull of possibility. They listen for a few days, maybe a week. Then the familiar noise of ordinary life swallows the whole thing whole. You are still here. That matters more than you know. But here is the question that deserves an honest answer right now, before this final chapter goes any further. What are you going to do with it? Not tomorrow, not when conditions are better. Tonight. The real risk at the end of a book like this one is not that you didn't understand it. The risk is that you understand it perfectly, feel genuinely moved, and then close your eyes tonight the exact same way you have closed them every other night, carrying the same quiet story about who you are and what is possible for you. That story has been running in the basement of your mind for years. Understanding it intellectually does nothing to stop it. This is where the work either becomes real, or it becomes another beautiful idea you once had. Walk through without looking for the key you no longer need. That sentence from the last chapter was not poetic decoration. It was a map. The door you once stood in front of, rehearsing arguments for why you deserve to pass through, that door was never locked by the world. It was locked by a version of you that believed scarcity was the ground beneath your feet. Permanent, solid, true. You spent years collecting evidence for that belief without realizing you were the one doing the collecting. Every time money was tight, you filed it. Every time an opportunity passed you by, you noted it. Every time someone else seemed to move forward while you stayed still, you built the case a little higher. That case felt like knowledge. It felt like honesty. But it was a story wearing the costume of a fact. Here is what you have been learning to do across every chapter of this book. You have been learning to go into the sleep window, that soft, unguarded place between waking and rest, and use it to rewrite what is written on the walls of that basement. Not through force, not through grinding repetition your conscious mind resists. Through the 1 hour when your defenses step back and your deeper self is actually willing to listen. The subconscious does not argue. It accepts. And for most of your life, what you fed it before sleep was worry, resentment, the low hum of financial stress. Tonight, you feed it something else. Picture the life you were living before these last 3 years unfolded, not the version of events you polish for other people. The real version. The middle-of-the-night version, when the numbers didn't add up and you lay there calculating. What was the story you told yourself in that darkness? That you were behind. That other people had something you didn't. That the gap between where you were and where you needed to be was evidence of something permanent about you. Sit with that for just a moment. That person, the one lying in the dark doing arithmetic on their inadequacy, that person was not seeing clearly. They were seeing through a lens ground down by years of inherited belief. And you have been carrying that lens forward, even as things slowly began to change. This is the open question that has been sitting quietly at the back of this entire book. Not how to make more money. That comes. Not how to think differently in the bright, loud hours of the day. That is the easy part. The real question is this: who are you when no one is watching and the lights are off? Because that version of you, the one in the dark, the one in the basement, the one humming beneath your plans and goals and intentions, that version is doing most of the deciding. Here is a story about a woman named Clara. Clara was 41 years old when she took a job she had been underqualified for on paper. Not because she was reckless, because something in her had quietly stopped believing she needed permission. She had spent 3 years before that applying to roles she was certain she deserved, writing careful cover letters and being told no in polite language. She believed the problem was her resume. It wasn't. It was the signal she was broadcasting before she opened her mouth. Something tired and apologetic lived behind her eyes. She knew the vocabulary of confidence, but her body spoke a different dialect. Then one winter she started a single practice. Before sleep, she spent 10 minutes replaying one memory. A specific afternoon when she had solved a problem no one else in the room could solve, and the room had gone quiet in recognition. Just that one memory, every night. She did not add affirmations. She did not listen to anything. She simply let that memory be the last fully inhabited experience before unconsciousness took her. 6 months later, she walked into an interview, and the hiring manager told her afterward that she had been the clearest candidate they had seen in 2 years. Clara had not changed her resume. She had changed what was running in the basement. What runs in your basement tonight is a choice. The wealth frequency, and this is the phrase this entire book has been moving toward, is not a vibration you manufacture. It is not positive thinking strapped to a vision board. It is the natural signal that comes from a nervous system that no longer treats scarcity as its default setting. When your body genuinely expects good things to arrive, not because life has been easy, but because you have reprogrammed the layer beneath conscious thought, you stop bracing. You stop hedging. You stop undercutting yourself in negotiations and opportunities and quiet private decisions. You simply move differently. And the world responds to how you move in ways that look, from the outside, like luck. It is not luck. You are not becoming a wealthy person. That framing has always been the problem. Becoming implies you are something lesser right now, working toward a distant destination. But scarcity was never the truth of you. It was a coat someone put on you early, and you have been wearing it so long you forgot it was not your skin. What this book has been doing, chapter by chapter and night by night, is not adding something new to who you are. It is removing something old and false that was laid over who you already were. Scarcity was always the lie. The wealth frequency is not a destination. It is a return. And here is the loop that opened quietly at the start of this chapter, now closing where it belongs. What are you going to do with it? Tonight, specifically. The answer is simpler than you have been making it. You are going to lie down. You are going to let the day release its grip. And in that narrow window between awake and asleep, you are going to hold one clear image of yourself. Not striving, not hustling, not earning approval. Simply existing as someone for whom money flows with the same ease that breath flows. Not dramatic, not forced, just natural. The way a frequency sounds when nothing is blocking it. That image is not a fantasy. It is a rehearsal. Your subconscious does not distinguish between what you experience and what you vividly imagine. It records both with equal fidelity. So tonight, you are recording something new, not over the old file with violence. Just underneath it, slowly and deliberately, the way water finds its way beneath stone. The day you wake up different is not a far-off morning. It might be tomorrow. It might be 6 weeks from now, when you notice that a financial decision came easily that once would have paralyzed you. It might be the morning you realize you negotiated for yourself without the rehearsed apology, without the small retreat. You will not announce it. You will not mark it on a calendar. You will simply notice in the middle of an ordinary moment that something in you has moved. Sleep tonight is not the end of this book. It is the first act of the one you are writing yourself. Close your eyes when you are ready. Let the noise of the day thin out, and when that threshold comes soft, edgeless, yours, carry one thing across it with you. You were never behind.